Picture this: the late 1930s, Germany is ramping up its naval power. Among their efforts, they construct two Bismarck-class battleships for the Kriegsmarine, with Tirpitz being the second. Named after Grand Admiral Alfred von Tirpitz, the mastermind behind Germany's Imperial Navy, construction of the Tirpitz began in Wilhelmshaven in November 1936. 2.5 years later, her hull was launched, and by February 1941, she was ready for action. Armed with 8 massive 38-centimeter guns arranged in 4 twin turrets, Tirpitz was a formidable presence on the seas. After various wartime modifications, she became 2,000 tons heavier than her sister ship, Bismarck, making her the heaviest battleship ever built by a European navy. Tirpitz underwent sea trials in early 1941 and briefly served as the centerpiece of the Baltic Fleet, aiming to prevent the Soviet Baltic Fleet from breaking out. By early 1942, she moved to Norway to deter Allied invasions and intercept convoys heading to the Soviet Union. During 1942, she attempted 2 such missions. The St. Nazaire raid had made operations against the Atlantic convoy lanes too risky, so Tirpitz's presence forced the British Royal Navy to keep significant forces nearby to contain her threat. September 1943 saw Tirpitz, alongside the battleship Scharnhorst, bombarding Allied positions in Spitsbergen. This was the only time Tirpitz used her main guns offensively. Shortly after, British mini-submarines damaged her, and she endured a series of large-scale air raids. On November 12, 1944, British Lancaster bombers, armed with massive 5,400 kg tallboy bombs, hit Tirpitz twice, causing her to capsize quickly. A deck fire reached the ammunition magazine of one of the main turrets, leading to a huge explosion. The attack resulted in the deaths of between 950 and 1,204 men. From 1948 to 1957, Norwegian and German teams worked together to break up the wreckage, bringing an end to the story of the Tirpitz. Design. In the mid-1930s, Germany's Kriegsmarine crafted 2 Bismarck-class battleships to counter France's naval growth, particularly the Richelieu-class ships started in 1935. The Tirpitz and her sister ship Bismarck began construction after the Anglo-German Naval Agreement of 1935, which aimed to limit battleships to 35,000 tons. Despite this, both ships exceeded this limit significantly. By the time these ships were completed, the international treaty system had collapsed. Japan's withdrawal from these agreements in 1937 allowed signatories to invoke an escalator clause, increasing the permissible displacement to 45,000 tons. Tirpitz was an impressive vessel, displacing 42,900 tons as built and reaching 52,600 tons when fully loaded. She measured 251 meters in length, had a beam of 36 meters, and a draft of 10.60 meters. Her crew consisted of 103 officers and 1,962 enlisted men initially, which increased to 108 officers and 2,500 men during the war. The ship was powered by 3 Brown, Bovary and Sea-geared steam turbines, each driving a screw propeller, with steam provided by 12 oil-fired Wagner superheated water tube boilers. This propulsion system generated 163,023 horsepower, allowing Tirpitz to reach a top speed of 30.8 knots during speed trials. Tirpitz's armament was formidable. She had 8 38cm SKC/34-liter/52 guns arranged in 4 twin turrets, 2 super-firing turrets forward, named Anton and Bruno, and 2 aft, named Caesar and Dora. Her secondary armament included 12 15cm length/55 guns, 16 10.5cm length/65 guns, and 16 3.7cm length/83 guns. Initially, she was equipped with 12 2cm C/30 anti-aircraft guns, which eventually increased to 58. After 1942, Tirpitz was fitted with 8 53.3cm above water torpedo tubes, arranged in 2 quadruple mounts on each side. Regarding technology, Tirpitz was initially equipped with Model 23 search radars, which were later upgraded to Models 27 and 26, featuring larger antenna arrays. In 1944, a Model 30 radar, known as the Hohentuil, was installed on her topmast, and a Model 213 Würzburg fire control radar was added to her stern 10.5cm anti-aircraft rangefinders. The ship's armor was also robust, with a main belt that was 320mm thick, complemented by upper and main armored decks that were 50mm and 100 to 120mm thick, respectively. The 38cm turrets were heavily fortified with 360mm thick faces and 220mm thick sides. Service history. Tirpitz was ordered as Ersatz Schleswig-Holstein, intended to replace the old pre-dreadnought ship Schleswig-Holstein, under the contract name G. The contract was awarded to the Kriegsmarine shipyard in Wilhelmshaven, and work began with the keel being laid on October 20, 1936. The hull was launched on April 1, 1939 in a grand ceremony. Ilse von Hassel, the daughter of Admiral Alfred von Tirpitz, after whom the ship was named, christened the ship. The event was significant enough to be attended by Adolf Hitler and featured a speech by Adolf von Trotha, a former admiral in the Imperial German Navy. Despite frequent attacks by British bombers on the harbor, no bombs hit Tirpitz, though the attacks did delay construction. By February 1941, the fitting out work was complete, and Tirpitz was commissioned into the fleet on 25 February for sea trials in the Baltic Sea. Following her sea trials, Tirpitz was stationed in Kiel, where she underwent intensive training. During this time, Germany invaded the Soviet Union, leading to the creation of a temporary Baltic fleet to prevent the Soviet fleet in Leningrad from breaking out. Tirpitz briefly served as the flagship of this squadron, which included the heavy cruiser Admiral Scheer, the light cruisers Köln, Nürnberg, Leipzig, and Emden, several destroyers, and 2 flotillas of minesweepers. Vice Admiral Otto Ciliax led the Baltic Fleet on patrol off Åland from 23 to September 26, 1941. After this, the unit was disbanded, and Tirpitz returned to training. During the training period, Tirpitz tested her primary and secondary guns on the old pre-dreadnought battleship Hessen, which had been converted into a radio-controlled target ship. Despite continued bombing attempts by the British Royal Air Force, RAF, while Tirpitz was stationed in Kiel, none of the raids succeeded in damaging the ship. Deployment to Norway. On November 13, 1941, Grand Admiral Erik Reder, the commander of the Kriegsmarine, proposed that the Tirpitz be sent to Norway. The idea was that the Tirpitz could attack Soviet-bound convoys and serve as a fleet in being to tie down British naval forces and deter an Allied invasion of Norway. Despite his earlier reluctance after the loss of the Bismarck, Hitler approved the plan. The ship was taken into dock for modifications, including strengthening its anti-aircraft battery and moving the 10.5 cm guns on the superstructure outboard to improve their field of fire. Additionally, 2 quadruple 53.3 cm torpedo tube mounts were installed. The ship's commander, Captain Karl Topp, declared the Tirpitz ready for combat on January 10, 1942. The next day, the Tirpitz left Wilhelmshaven for Trondheim. The move was carefully planned to hide her actual destination. The ship departed Wilhelmshaven at 11 p.m. on 14 January. British intelligence, capable of decrypting German naval messages, detected the ship's departure, but poor weather prevented the RAF from acting. Admiral John Tovey, Commander-in-Chief of the British Home Fleet, did not learn of Tirpitz's activities until 17 January, after the ship had already arrived in Norway. On 16 January, British reconnaissance found the ship in Trondheim. Tirpitz then moved to Fettenfjord, just northeast of Trondheim, in an operation codenamed Polar Night. The battleship was escorted by the destroyers Z-4 Richard Bietzen, Z-5 Paul Jacobi, Z-8 Bruno Heinemann, and Z-29 during the voyage. The Norwegian resistance informed London of her location. Moored next to a cliff for protection from air attacks from the southwest, the crew camouflaged the ship by cutting down trees and placing them aboard Tirpitz. To further avoid detection, they frequently hid the ship in a cloud of artificial fog made from water and chlorosulfuric acid. Additional anti-aircraft batteries were installed around the fjord, along with anti-torpedo nets and heavy booms at the entrance. Dubbed the Lonely Queen of the North because of her rare deployments, life aboard the Tirpitz was monotonous for her crew. Frequent fuel shortages curtailed training and kept the battleship and her escorts behind protective netting. The crew mainly focused on ship maintenance and manning anti-aircraft defenses. To keep morale and fitness levels high, sports activities were organized. Operations against Allied convoys. Several challenges limited Tirpitz's operations in Norway. The most critical issues were fuel shortages and the redeployment of German destroyers to support Operation Cerberus, involving the battleships Scharnhorst and Gneisenau, along with the heavy cruiser Prince Eugene, through the English Channel. These factors led to the abandonment of a planned attack on convoy PQ-8 in late January. A British air attack by heavy bombers also failed due to poor weather. In early February, Tirpitz engaged in deceptive maneuvers to distract the British in the lead-up to Operation Cerberus. This included leaving the fjord and appearing to prepare for a sortie into the North Sea. Later that month, the ship was reinforced by the heavy cruisers Admiral Scheer and Prince Eugene, and several destroyers. Unfortunately, Prince Eugene was torpedoed by a British submarine at the entrance to Fettenfjord and was temporarily out of action. In March 1942, Tirpitz, Admiral Scheer, and several destroyers planned to attack convoys QP-8 and PQ-12 during Operation Sports Palace. However, Admiral Scheer was too slow to operate with Tirpitz and was left behind, as were some destroyers and torpedo boats. On 5 March, Luftwaffe reconnaissance spotted PQ-12 near Jan Mayen Island but failed to note the presence of the battleship HMS Duke of York and the battlecruiser HMS Renown escorting the convoy. Unbeknownst to the Germans, Admiral Tovey supported the convoys with HMS King George V, the aircraft carrier HMS Victorious, and other ships. Enigma intercepts alerted the British to Tirpitz's attack, allowing the convoys to be rerouted. Admiral Tovey attempted to engage Tirpitz on 9 March, but German commander Admiral Otto Ciliax had already decided to return to port. On the same day, 12 Fairey Albacore torpedo bombers attacked Tirpitz, but the ship evaded the torpedoes, with only 3 men wounded. Tirpitz then moved to Vestfjord and Trondheim, arriving on 13 March. On 30 March, 33 Halifax bombers attacked but missed, and 5 aircraft were shot down. The RAF launched 2 unsuccessful raids in late April, resulting in more bombers being shot down by German defenses. The actions in March consumed 8,230 tons of fuel oil, significantly depleting the supply. It took 3 months to replenish the fuel used in the attempt to intercept the convoys. Convoy PQ-17, which left Iceland on 27 June, was the next target during Operation Knight's Move. The convoy was escorted by battleships Duke of York, USS Washington, and the carrier Victorious. Tirpitz, Admiral Hipper, and 6 destroyers set out from Trondheim, while another task force operated from Narvik and Bogenfjord. However, Lutzow and 3 destroyers hit uncharted rocks and had to return to port. Shortly after departing, the Soviet submarine K-21 fired torpedoes at Tirpitz, but they missed. Despite Soviet claims of hits, Swedish intelligence had already reported the German departure, prompting the British to order the convoy to disperse. With their position compromised, the Germans aborted the mission, leaving U-boats and the Luftwaffe to attack. They managed to sink 21 of the 34 scattered transports. Tirpitz returned to Altafjord via the Lofoten Islands. Following Operation Knight's Move, Tirpitz moved to Bogenfjord near Narvik, needing a major overhaul. Hitler forbade the ship's return to Germany, so the repairs were done in Trondheim. On 23 October, Tirpitz returned to Fettenfjord. The anchorage defenses were strengthened, additional anti-aircraft guns installed, and double anti-torpedo nets laid. Repairs were conducted in phases to keep Tirpitz partially operational. A caisson was built around the stern to replace the rudders. During this period, the British attempted to attack the battleship with 2 Chariot human torpedoes, but rough seas caused them to break away from the towing vessel. By 28 December, repairs were completed, and Tirpitz began sea trials, including gunnery trials on January 4, 1943 in Trondheim Fjord. On 21 February, Top was promoted, and Captain Hans Meyer took command. 5 days later, the battleship Scharnhorst was ordered to reinforce the Norwegian fleet, with Vice Admiral Oskar Kummetz in command of the warships. By March 1943, Allied convoys to the Soviet Union had temporarily ceased, allowing the German ships to work together. Admiral Karl Dönitz, who replaced Raeder after the Battle of the Barents Sea, ordered an attack on Spitsbergen, a British weather station and refueling base defended by 152 Norwegian troops. On 6 September, Tirpitz, flying a false flag, approached Spitsbergen with Scharnhorst and 10 destroyers. Tirpitz fired 52 main battery shells and 82 secondary rounds, marking her only use of the main battery against an enemy surface target. The assault force destroyed installations and captured 74 prisoners, returning to their Norwegian ports by 11 o'clock. British attacks on Tirpitz. Determined to neutralize Tirpitz and remove her threat to the Allied Arctic convoys, the British devised a bold new plan. After repeated, ineffective bombing attacks and a failed torpedo assault in October 1942, they turned to the newly designed X-craft midget submarines. This plan, known as Operation Source, targeted not just Tirpitz but also the battleships Scharnhorst and Lutzow. The X-craft were towed by larger submarines to their destinations, where they would slip under anti-torpedo nets and plant powerful 2-ton mines on the seabed beneath their targets. Operation Source was scheduled for September 25, 1943. Of the 10 vessels assigned, only 8 reached Kåfjord in Norway to begin the attack on 22 September. 3 of the vessels, X5, X6, and X7, breached Tirpitz's defenses. X6 and X7 managed to lay their mines, while X5 was detected 200 meters from the nets and sunk by a combination of gunfire and depth charges. The mines caused extensive damage to Tirpitz. One exploded next to turret Caesar, and the other detonated 45 to 55 meters off the port bow. The explosions ruptured a fuel oil tank, tore the ship's shell plating, and created a large indentation in the bottom of the ship. Bulkheads in the double bottom buckled, and about 1,430 tons of water flooded the ship's fuel tanks and void spaces, causing a list of 1 to 2 degrees. This was balanced by counter-flooding on the starboard side. The flooding damaged all turbo generators in generator room number 2 and all but one generator in generator room number 1. Turret Dora was thrown off its bearings and could not be rotated, a significant issue as no heavy lift cranes in Norway were powerful enough to reposition the turret. The ship's 2 Arado R-196 floatplanes were also completely destroyed. Repairs were conducted by the repair ship Neumark. Historians William Garsk and Robert Doolin have noted that the successful repair efforts were one of the most notable feats of naval engineering during the Second World War. Repairs lasted until April 2, 1944, with full-speed trials scheduled for the following day in Alta Fjord. By March, the British knew that the repair ship Neumark and its crew had left, indicating that Tirpitz was nearly operational. A major airstrike, named Operation Tungsten, was planned to involve the fleet carriers Victorious and Furious and the escort carriers Emperor, Fencer, Pursuer, and Searcher. Initially set for April 4, 1944, the attack was rescheduled to 3 April after Enigma decrypts revealed that Tirpitz would depart for sea trials at 5:29 that morning. The attack involved 40 Barracuda dive bombers armed with 230 kilograms, 270 kilograms, and 730 kilograms armor-piercing bombs, along with 40 escorting fighters, launched in 2 waves. The aircraft achieved surprise, and only one was lost in the first wave. It took 12 to 14 minutes for Tirpitz's anti-aircraft batteries to be fully manned. The first wave struck at 5:29 as tugs were preparing to assist the ship. The second wave hit an hour later, shortly after 6:30. Despite the German anti-aircraft gunners' alertness, only one other bomber was shot down. Although the strikes did not penetrate the main armor, they caused significant damage to the superstructure and inflicted heavy casualties. According to historians William Garsk and Robert Doolin, the attack killed 122 men and wounded 316 others. Another source, Hildebrand, Rohr, and Steinmetz, reported 132 fatalities and 270 wounded, including the ship's commander, Captain Hans Meyer. 2 of the 15 cm turrets and both Arado R-196 floatplanes were destroyed. Several bomb hits caused serious fires aboard the ship. The concussive shock disabled the starboard turbine engine, and salt water used to fight the fires reached the boilers, contaminating the feed water. About 2,000 tons of water flooded the ship through holes in the side shell created by near misses, and additional water used to combat the fires also contributed to the flooding. Despite recognizing that Tirpitz could no longer be used effectively in surface action due to insufficient fighter support, Admiral Dönitz ordered repairs regardless of the cost. Repair work began in early May, with destroyers ferrying vital equipment and workers from Kiel to Alta Fjord over 3 days. By 2 June, Tirpitz could again steam under her own power, and by the end of the month, gunnery trials were possible. During the repairs, the 15 cm guns were modified for anti-aircraft use, and specially fused 38 cm shells for barrage anti-aircraft fire were supplied. A series of carrier strikes were planned over the next 3 months to continue the assault on Tirpitz, but bad weather forced the cancellation of several operations. A follow-up to Operation Tungsten, named Operation Planet, was scheduled for 24 April. Operation Brawn, involving 27 bombers and 36 fighters from Victorious and Furious, was planned for 15 May, and Operation Tiger Claw was intended for 28 May. For Operation Mascot on 17 July, Formidable and Furious were joined by Indefatigable, but bad weather once again hindered their efforts. In late August, the weather finally improved, allowing the Goodwood series of attacks to proceed. Operations Goodwood 1 and 2 launched on 22 August, with fleet carriers Furious, Indefatigable, and Formidable, as well as escort carriers Nabob and Trumpeter, deploying a total of 38 bombers and 43 escort fighters over 2 raids. Despite these efforts, the attacks failed to damage Tirpitz, and 3 attacking aircraft were shot down. Goodwood 3 followed on 24 August, involving only aircraft from the fleet carriers. This attack included 48 bombers and 29 fighters, managing to score 2 hits that caused minor damage. One 730 kg bomb penetrated both the upper and lower armored decks but did not detonate due to a damaged fuse. The other, a 230 kg bomb, exploded but only caused superficial damage. 6 aircraft were shot down during this attack. Goodwood 4 took place on 29 August with 34 bombers and 25 fighters from Formidable and Indefatigable, but heavy fog prevented any hits. Tirpitz's gunners managed to shoot down 1 Firefly and 1 Corsair. During this series of attacks, the battleship fired 54 rounds from her main guns. 161 rounds from her 15 cm guns, and up to 20% of her light anti-aircraft ammunition. Due to the limited success of the fleet air arms strikes in mid-1944, the task of destroying Tirpitz was handed over to the RAF's No. 5 Group. They employed Lancaster bombers equipped with 5.4-ton tallboy bombs designed to penetrate heavy armor. The first major attack, Operation Paravane, was launched on September 15, 1944 from a forward base in Yaganik, Russia. In this operation, 23 Lancasters, 17 carrying a single tallboy each and 6 carrying 12 JW mines each, managed to score a hit on Tirpitz's bow. The tallboy bomb penetrated the ship, exited through the keel, and exploded on the fjord's bottom. This caused the bow to flood with 800 to 1,000 tons of water, severely affecting the ship's trim and rendering her unseaworthy, limiting her speed to 8 to 10 knots. The concussive shock also caused severe damage to her fire control equipment. It was decided to repair Tirpitz only for use as a floating gun battery. Initial patching allowed her to be moved to Tromsø, a 370-kilometer journey she undertook on 15 October, marking her final voyage. The RAF launched a second attack on 29 October when Tirpitz was moored off Hakoya Island near Tromsø. During Operation Obviate, 32 Lancasters attacked with tallboy bombs. The attack resulted in only one near miss due to poor weather conditions. The underwater explosion from the near miss damaged the port rudder and shaft, causing some flooding. Tirpitz's 38 cm fragmentation shells were ineffective against the high-flying bombers, and only one aircraft was damaged by ground-based anti-aircraft fire. Following this attack, substantial efforts were made to improve Tirpitz's anchorage. A large sandbank was constructed under and around the ship to prevent capsizing, and anti-torpedo nets were installed. Tirpitz retained a 1-degree list to port from previous damage, which was not corrected to maintain reserve buoyancy. The ship was also prepared for her role as a floating artillery platform, with fuel limited to what was necessary to power the turbo generators, and the crew reduced to 1,600 officers and enlisted men. Operation Catechism, the final British assault on the Tirpitz, occurred on November 12, 1944. The battleship's 38 cm guns were once again used against the incoming bombers, which approached at 9:35. Tirpitz's main guns temporarily scattered the bombers but failed to halt the attack. A force of 32 Lancasters from numbers 9 and 617 squadrons dropped 29 tallboy bombs on the ship, achieving 2 direct hits and 1 near miss. Several other bombs landed within the anti-torpedo net barrier, causing significant cratering of the seabed and removing much of the sandbank constructed to prevent capsizing. One bomb penetrated the deck between turrets Anton and Bruno but did not explode. Another hit amidships between the aircraft catapult and the funnel, causing severe damage. This blast created a large hole in the ship's side and bottom, completely destroying an entire section of belt armor. A third bomb may have struck the port side of turret Caesar. The amidships hit caused substantial flooding and rapidly increased the port list to between 15 and 20 degrees. Within 10 minutes, the list grew to 30 to 40 degrees, prompting the captain to order the crew to abandon ship. By 9:50, the list had increased to 60 degrees, temporarily stabilizing before a large explosion at turret Caesar 8 minutes later. The turret roof and part of its rotating structure were hurled 25 meters into the air, landing on a group of men swimming to shore and crushing them. Tirpitz quickly capsized, burying her superstructure in the sea floor. In the aftermath, 82 men trapped in the upturned hull were rescued by cutting through the exposed bottom. The death toll from the attack varies, with estimates ranging from approximately 950 to 1,204. Around 200 survivors were transferred to the heavy cruiser Lutzow in January 1945. The Luftwaffe's performance in defending Tirpitz was heavily criticized after her loss. Major Heinrich Erler, the commander of 3/Jagdgeschwader 5, 3rd Wing of the 5th Fighter Group, was blamed for failing to intercept the British bombers. He was court-martialed in Oslo and threatened with the death penalty. Evidence suggested his unit had failed to assist the Kriegsmarine when requested. Erler was sentenced to 3 years in prison but was released after a month, demoted, and reassigned to an Me 262 fighter squadron in Germany. Later investigations exonerated Erler, concluding that poor communication between the Kriegsmarine and the Luftwaffe was to blame. The air crews had not been informed that Tirpitz had been moved off Hakoya 2 weeks before the attack. The wreck of Tirpitz remained in place until after the war. A joint German-Norwegian company began salvage operations, which lasted from 1948 to 1957. Fragments of the ship were sold by a Norwegian company. Historian Ludovic Kennedy wrote that Tirpitz lived an invalid's life and died a cripple's death. The story of the Tirpitz is a tale of formidable power, strategic maneuvers, and relentless Allied determination. From her inception to her final moments under the icy waters of Norway, Tirpitz's journey marked a significant chapter in naval warfare history. Her legacy, preserved through salvage operations and historical records, serves as a poignant reminder of the immense efforts and sacrifices made during World War II. Thank you for joining us in exploring the life and ultimate fate of this mighty battleship. Stay tuned for more fascinating wartime stories and naval history. Thanks for watching, The Animated General. Out.